FanBoi with Harley Morenstein is a Castbox original produced in partnership with Studio 71. Castbox is the fastest growing, highest rated podcast app on both iOS and Android, where you can find all your favorite podcasts. You can listen to FanBoi with Harley Morenstein wherever you get your podcasts, but we hope you'll give Castbox a shot. I think it's the best. Well, this is it, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 1 of the FanBoi podcast with Harley Morenstein. Games, anime, movies, comics, wrestling, basically all the geekiest, nerdiest stuff that I love and have always loved and is now embraced by everyone pretty much. I get to just talk about it. God, I always have so many things to say. For this first episode, I wanted to give you guys some background about myself outside of the food space, because I know people know me from Epic Mealtime for the most part. I've had a YouTube channel cooking show with 7 million subscribers for the past 8 years. But way before that, I did a gaming show. That was a failure. And I did another gaming show that was a failure. And I've always liked gaming. And I worked in a video game store. And when I was at Toys R Us, I was dying to get that upgrade to the R Zone. I got, over 150,000 gamer score on my Xbox, PC, Nintendo. I watch Bleach. There's just a lot about me that people don't know. And I guess this episode is kind of like my credentials, kind of like a beacon point to go back to and be like, hey, what does Harley know about this stuff anyways? So I'll try and do my best to encapsulate who I am in this space. I mean, people know I love Star Wars because I've blasted it on Epic Mealtime and on my channel and stuff like that. But I thought, let's go in a little in depth on me, my dark side, the side that is the side that you would get slapped for having in the early 90s in high school if you demonstrated love for any of this type of thing. I'm telling you, I was in high school in the 90s and the early 2000s. But in the 90s, if you spoke about like Japanese anime, you were getting slapped up because the rappers back then were talking about, getting blowjobs, not about watching anime. Well, anyways, let's just jump right into it. Shout out Philly D. I was a high school teacher, and in the year 2010, I started an Epic Mealtime, a YouTube cooking show. But way before that, I was a big old gaming boy. I could take it back from the very beginning. The first game I ever played was Adventure Island on Nintendo. My first console that belonged to me was a Sega Genesis, and I've had quite the adventure in gaming over the years. I decided to get into podcasting because, there's so many opinions out there, and, I have so many people that are in my circle, my audience, and the people that I connect with when I'm streaming or uploading, and I know a lot of them want to hear more of my opinion, and I would love to get dialogues going, and this podcast was just one method of me being able to connect with my audience on certain things even deeper. So what do I know about games, movies, comics, and anime? Well, my favorite movie is Terminator 2. It's the first movie I ever saw in theaters. The animes I loved and watched were Dragon Ball Z, Bleach, Initial D, Death Note, My Hero Academia, One Punch Man, and all the movies like Ninja Scroll and all those classic movies, Akira. These are things that I enjoyed. And anime is more mainstream than ever. It's like all the nerdiest things we've ever cared about growing up. By we, I mean, me and you listening to this podcast. The nerdiest things that we ever cared about growing up are popular now and mainstream. It's like you have rappers like rapping about anime. It's I don't know. It's like a weird place. I'm happy because the world could have gone in a very different place, but instead it's gone to this place where I'm glad that everyone's a bunch of freaking nerds. I'm happy about that. I don't want to do this podcast because I want to go in deep with things. As much as I like stuff, as much as I like enjoying a hobby or whatever, it's once I get in deep to it that it's really interesting. I mean, Star Wars is fun on the surface, but when you really start getting into the rule of two and all the ins and outs of being a Sith or a Jedi, it gets even more interesting. Or gaming. It's one thing to pick up a controller and play and enjoy gaming, but it's another thing to want to dive into, the mind of a developer in today's culture and what it means to make a game today, or how much it costs, or the risk, AAA or indie. And I want to use this podcast because I want to go in deeper with everyone. And why should you listen to this podcast? I mean, ultimately, you should follow your heart, and your heart will lead you to me. But at the end of the day, I think you should listen to this podcast because I think if there's one thing I've been good at, it's being a gatekeeper for certain things. And I don't mean gatekeeper in the bad sense that it's like, well, that's not a grilled cheese sandwich, that's a melt. I meant like a gatekeeper like, the river Styx in hell, and there's that like the Grim Reaper, whoever takes you across the river Styx on that boat into hell. I feel like I am that boat and that Grim Reaper that can take you in across the river Styx into whatever realm it may be. So let's say you're into anime but you don't like games. I can get you into games. If you are into gaming but you don't like wrestling, I can get you into wrestling. I mean, if one thing I've noticed about Epic Mealtime looking back is that over the years, Epic Mealtime has it got people into cooking. People that were not into cooking got into cooking. So I think I can make a good, a good Sherpa. And I think that's why you should listen to this podcast. Because on episodes where we dive into things that you might like or you might be interested in, my goal would be to take you deeper and further and to go beyond, way beyond. You want to talk Game of Thrones, let's go way beyond in there. Because when I think about things, I get a little obsessive and I focus on it a lot. And that's why the podcast name is called FanBoi. Because ultimately, I get caught up in the hype. I love the hype. And, one of my greatest strengths and weaknesses is how much I get caught up in the hype. So when a game is coming out Lord forgive me, Battlefront 2, I am that guy that is lining up at midnight. I'm there at midnight. I want the game. I know everyone has it out for EA these days. They're like, God damn, Battlefront 2. EA loot boxes. Screw it to hell. Damn it all to hell. I'm still that guy that is like, yeah, damn that to hell. But when Battlefront 3 comes out, I'm there at midnight and I'm going to buy it. I don't pre-order games anymore, though. I know that's a big thing. There's a big movement on not pre-ordering games. I don't pre-order games because you could just download them. There's actually no point in pre-ordering games. It's like a whole episode in itself. But I am that hype beast about stuff. I love getting caught up in the hype train. I love going to Star Wars movies at midnight. I like going to, if I like the franchise, if I like the game, I'll invest time and I'll invest money into it. Now it's different because now I have a better job than I've ever had before. But back in the day, I'm ashamed to admit this. And I remember a friend of mine cussing me out, but I loved Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I mean, that game practically taught me how to play an RPG. Well, that and Fable, because I never gave RPGs a chance before these games. And when Fable came around, I was like, oh, this is how this game is. And then I played Oblivion, and I was like, oh, this is for the big boys. But I bought the horse armor for Elder Scrolls Oblivion. Now, for those that don't know, the horse armor it was the first time DLC ever came out on a console in my memory that I can think of. And it was for Oblivion. And all it was horse armor. So it was armor on your horse. So when you get on your horse, it'll have a hat. No, not a hat. I'm just kidding. It'll have armor, it's on its legs and it's on its back and a saddle, because normally you just get on a bareback horse. Bareback. You get on the horse bareback. Bareback. I'm an idiot. But for 400 Microsoft points, which ultimately the cost was $5.99 Canadian, $6, you got this horse armor. So for $6, you got an aesthetic piece that literally didn't do a single damn thing except when you got on your horse. You were like, hey, what up? And I bought that. And I bought it, and I knew it was a ripoff, but I was still kind of happy to get on the horse and have that armor. The interesting thing is, though, I was happy to have it because the horse should have had the armor to begin with. But it didn't. But I was still happy to experience it and have it be there. And I was happy to brush the $5, $6 cost under the rug. So I'm that much of the hype beast that, like, you know, when everyone's like, oh my God, horse armor, burn it. I'm like, yeah, burn it to the ground. Yo, dog, you want to hook up some of that horse armor for your boy, premium $6 cost. And this is before I was a teacher. I was a student. I didn't even have a job then. So it was, I'm basically trying to illustrate it was a very stupid purchase. But I got caught up. I liked it. I was about it. And what I'm saying is I am single-handedly responsible for loot boxes. Now that we're in this dystopian future of video games where people hate loot boxes, I am that guy where I'm like, hey, my bad. I did it. It's me. Where do I see this podcast in a year from now? I mean, I just see in a year from now, I have a Discord. My Discord link, it's probably on wherever you downloaded this somewhere. I'll put it. It's on my Twitter. I just want to have that circle grow. My people grow. I want to communicate with you guys. I want to talk about these things. I think I have a really smart audience. I think a lot of the audience that watches my vlogs or Epic Meal Time, I think a lot of them are smart. I know we're not like the bumbling 11-year-old Jake Paul watching idiots. I know that. I know some of us, play Fortnite. I'm sure some of us have popped Xanax to enjoy ourselves or something. But I know ultimately we're not those little idiots. And I like my fan base. I respect my fan base. And I know that you guys have great opinions and great perspectives. And I want to connect with you people. And that's what I see in a year from now is us just connecting on more things. Having that circle, that deeper circle. I've had it with my vlog and stuff like that. But I want to have it more specifically for, this nerdy stuff that we can all connect on if you're into it. This podcast, every week, baby, it's going to be here. I plan on connecting with you guys every single week. I think my favorite game series will have to be, let's give a top 5. And it's probably an episode in itself. Halo, Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, Splinter Cell. Can I say Tom Clancy and have it count as a whole series? I love Ghost Recon. I love Rainbow Six. It's Halo. I hold Halo close to my heart, though, because Halo's interesting. Halo Combat Evolved was, I'll never forget it. I got a Sega Genesis for Hanukkah in the 3rd grade. And even though I loved my Sega Genesis, I traded with my cousin and borrowed a Super Nintendo a lot. And my mom was like, why do you always play that Super Nintendo? You asked for a Sega Genesis. Now, I didn't actually ask for a Sega Genesis. My brother asked for the Sega Genesis because the sports games, one were to believe, were better on Sega Genesis back in the day. Why? Well, I think the number one reason why sports games were better on Sega Genesis back in the day was one particular reason. And it was the moment I got my Sega Genesis. And it was the moment I first turned it on. Do you remember what the Sega Genesis does when you first turn it on? It was the most mind-blowing experience. And I know it sounds so funny now, but in 1993, or to people that experienced it even earlier, it was an incredible experience. You took that Sega Genesis, you turned it on, and the first thing that happens, it says Sega. And just being like, it talks. It talks. Oh my God, it talks. Because Nintendo never spoke. And even Super Nintendo, I'm sure it maybe had 1 or 2 lines that could be said, but it didn't talk. This said Sega. Like, my video game spoke to me. And if you want to talk about the leaps and bounds that video games make and why some people might look at one generation to the next and be like, well, that ain't nothing. And that's because the leap from like Nintendo to Sega Genesis and then to Super Nintendo was that it spoke. It went from not talking beeps and boops to saying Sega. And so video games, like sports games, were interesting because you actually had game commentary almost the entire game. Even though he said like, boom, he's on his back 15 times in a game, he was still saying, boom, he's on his back in that Madden game. But when the sports vibes faded and I went to the video game store to rent a game like a Blockbuster, there was one section of Sega Genesis games, and then there was just countless walls of Super Nintendo games. Like, there was 20 times more Super Nintendo games than Sega Genesis games, and all I was thinking was, I need to play more games. I can't just keep sitting here waiting for Vector Man to come out. I gotta play games like Uniracers and Super Punch Out, and Contra Hard Corps is bad, but I want to play Super Contra and all this stuff. Like, there was so many games, Double Dragon, Battletoads and Double Dragons. Once you got past the fact that you could put the blood code in Sega Genesis Mortal Kombat, there really wasn't much else beyond. I mean, the Super Nintendo just had so much selection. So I had to take part in that. I wanted to be part of that. So I used to always trade my Sega Genesis for a Super Nintendo with my buddies. And back then I was like, you know what? I am never not going to get a Nintendo system again. I will get the Nintendo system forever. And I committed to Nintendo. And then sure enough, N64 came out and I played so much James Bond. I played so much WCW versus NWO at my buddy's house. Like, I played so much N64. I loved it. And I was dead set. I was like, I'm going to get an N64. But the thing is, by the way, I didn't get these systems when they first came out. I didn't come from a rich family where we could do that. I came from one where it was like my bar mitzvah was coming up. I would be turning 13 years old in the Jewish religion, becoming a man. And so you can get, you throw a party with like 400 people basically. And, it ain't no thing for 20 people to each throw in $20 and come out with a Nintendo 64. And what happened was my brother, who was responsible for the Sega Genesis purchase, did just that. He orchestrated his friends and they bought a PlayStation for me. But like I told you guys, I was Team Nintendo already. It was all about Nintendo. So I got an N64 from my aunt with NFL Blitz and GoldenEye. And all winter break long, for 2 weeks straight with my cousins over, we played the shit out of that Nintendo 64. Played so much Blitz, so much GoldenEye. Like, beat the game, like, went in, like, nonstop, just so much. I loved it. And then I went to the store to rent an N64 game, and there wasn't any. It was like, there was no games. It's like the situation I had with my Sega Genesis was now occurring for my Nintendo 64. I mean, there was this game, Winback, that looked awesome, that was literally never in. It was always rented out. And other than that, there was just no game I wanted to play. I didn't get it. Like, I would go and I would try Doom 64 and stuff like that, and they were terrible. There was no good games other than the ones I've already played, which was like 6 games. So I went back home and decided I would crack open this PlayStation and plug it in. Wasn't really big into sports anymore though, and the PlayStation was the superior sports system. And I didn't care about that once again. I wasn't so into sports games. But I still cracked that bad boy open, and there was a demo disc inside. Demo disc had like Gran Turismo and this game Metal Gear Solid. And I wasn't that good at video games back then. I hadn't beat many games. And I remember looking at this, the back of this demo disc, and it's saying tactical stealth espionage action or something. And I was just like, that sounds hard, bro. That just sounds hard. Anyways, I decided I would boot up this game, Metal Gear Solid. It doesn't even Sounds like a broken sentence. I booted it up. And it, once again, the N64 could not do what the PlayStation could do in terms of capabilities. Like, in terms of how the Sega Genesis could talk and the Super Nintendo couldn't quite talk. The PlayStation can just, it could have like, it could do music. It could do music and sound that like the N64 could not. This was off a CD. And I put it on and that Konami sound comes out. And I'm like, whoa. And the beginning of Metal Gear Solid starts, and it's just like, you got this cutscene, they're on like a nuclear sub, and the main guy, his name is Snake. You're like, what, Snake already? This guy's name's Snake. He's in a one-man pod. The one-man pod is gonna go underground, and it's gonna land under the water, and it's gonna enter the base from below. And I'm like, yo, this is The Rock. This is like Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage, like. And back then, in the 90s, like, the closer a game mimicked an awesome scene from a movie, you weren't like, oh my God, you totally took that from the movie. You were like, yo, that's awesome. This is just like the movie. You know, shout out to Medal of Honor Frontline. But this Metal Gear experience of you know, this cutscene, and you go in underwater and then you come out, like, it was just so crazy for a game to start that like a movie. For a game to be a movie. I've never experienced a game be like a movie. They were their own things. Maybe they were trying to be like a cute cartoon or something else. But this was the most like cinematic experience I've ever had in gaming. And I remember coming out of that water and going to these bad guys. There's 3 bad guys walking around, and Metal Gear was all about stealth. And I'm like, punch, 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 punch. Punch, punch, punch. And I keep knocking these guys out, and they keep getting back up, and they keep shooting me, and they keep killing me, and I just don't get it. And there's no instructions, and I don't know what's happening. And if you press square, you could throw a guy. So I pressed square, and I would throw him on his back, and I'd throw him on his back, and it wasn't doing anything. It just kept getting back up. Until one time I pressed square, and the guy went, "Ur." And I was like, what? So I grabbed him again, and I pressed square, and he went, "Ur." And his neck broke. Now, once again, I know this sounds like okay. In 1998, you didn't snap necks in games. Like, the concept of snapping a neck just did not occur. This, like, a stealth kill. This was my first stealth kill. This did not exist in gaming. Now, like, every good game has, like, the ability to, like, a stealth mechanic. But this game, like, I just broke this guy's neck like it was a movie, like Silence and Violence, like, creeping up behind the dude, broke his neck. That was incredible to me. That was so sick. I was like, yo, it's a movie. This is a movie. Then you gotta hide the body. Hide the body? Break the guy's neck? Hide the body? Like, what is going on? Before this, the craziest leap I had in gaming was in GoldenEye, the fact that you could take a sniper rifle. Once again, kids, today you're spoiled. In 1997, the idea of like a sniper rifle scope in a video game was like outlandish, unless you were playing PC games, but I'm trying to keep it console now, and I'll get into my PC life maybe next time, but my console experience, you did not snipe people in the face. GoldenEye, zooming in with the scope and sniping someone in the face was crazy. Metal Gear, you got to do that later, but also the fact that you could break necks and hide bodies, outlandishly cool to me. Outlandishly cool. I was obsessed. I was like, I need this game. I need this game. I need this game. I went and I bought that game. It came out on 2 discs. I'll get into my experience with that game in depth on a future one, because I could say so much about why Metal Gear is beautiful and it deserves its own episode of the podcast. But I'm still trying to illustrate myself as a gamer. So I loved my PlayStation. I used my PlayStation so much. I unfortunately was a pirate back in the day, and I had a mod chip for my PlayStation. I had every game, and then I was like, I'm getting a PlayStation no matter what. I'm not a Nintendo guy. I'm a PlayStation guy. Now, this entire time, by the way, I've been playing PC on my dad's computer, but I did run at 10 frames per second. I always loved Doom. I loved Quake. I loved Quake 2. Quake 3 was incredible. My computer couldn't run it. And all this was happening in the background. But it was never truly gaming. Back then I liked consoles because I had a bad computer. And it was a terrible feeling to go and try and compete with people online, which I loved. But to do it at 10 frames per second, it was just miserable. Like I never got to be a PC gamer. I just loved games. I loved PC games. But I never really got to get lost in it. And first-person shooters were my favorite. I loved them. And even though GoldenEye was cool, I thought Counter-Strike was cooler than GoldenEye, you know? I thought playing multiplayer Quake 3 Arena with 32 people was cooler than GoldenEye, you know? GoldenEye was great, but just for the split screen play, it didn't have what I really liked about PC gaming. But regardless, I needed to get a PlayStation 2 because I was a PlayStation guy now, and Metal Gear Solid 2 was coming out. And I needed that more than anything. More than anything. But my mom said to me, she paid attention, she was like, you said you wanted a Sega Genesis, and then you ended up playing the Super Nintendo. And then you got the N64, but you ended up playing the PlayStation. Now you want to get a PlayStation? You have to try the other ones first. So my mom made me rent these things over the span of like a year. For 1 year, I had to rent the PlayStation 2, you know, make sure I like it. She wanted me to rent a GameCube. I didn't need to rent it. I knew I didn't want a GameCube. But, you know, she told me to rent it. I did. I started reading about the Microsoft Xbox. And it just seemed so much more powerful. And I was like, well, here I am again. I mean, the 64 I thought was going to be better than the PlayStation, but I was wrong about that. I thought the Sega Genesis was faster than the Super Nintendo, but I was wrong about that. But now Microsoft is making a console, and like it's like computers. I don't like computers. My experience with computers is it's expensive and it's not fair and it doesn't run like the same for everyone and it's not going to be good. So what am I supposed to do? I guess I got to try it. And it's funny because a lot of you guys know I'm friends with Amir, right? Amir, Chef Atari, the chef on Epic Mealtime. Well, the way I met him was we were in class together and I heard him talking about PlayStation. And I walked over. I was like, well, this guy's a loony bin and he looks like he plays games all his life. I'm gonna ask him his opinion on it here. So I went up and I was like, yo, what do you think about Xbox? Because he was talking about PlayStation. I wasn't expecting the opinion he had. No joke. His opinion right off the bat, he was like, Xbox? The only game Xbox has is Halo. Beyond that, they have nothing else. When that system launches, there's going to be nothing to play. And I was like, damn, I've had that problem before. I should rent this system. And I'm going to go rent it, and I'm going to rent Tony Hawk 2X because I love Tony Hawk 2. And in Tony Hawk 2X on Xbox, you get to play two players. And on PlayStation 2, when you played two players, levels like the school were cut in half. You didn't get the whole school. But on Xbox, because of the memory and all that, you'll be able to play in the whole school. So I was like, awesome. It's Tony Hawk 2X. I invited over my buddy, Matt, and, I rented Tony Hawk 2X. And, when you rent the system, you can rent 2 games. And I was like, what other game should I rent here? And I'm looking at all these games that are out on Xbox as a launch game. And I was like, there's nothing. Oh, there's that game Halo Amir was talking about. He said this is the only game that is on the system. So I grabbed it. And my buddy came over. We blazed up. We were in the 11th grade. And we booted up Tony Hawk 2X. And we played it. And we liked it. We hated the controller, though. Both of us hated the controller. Playing Tony Hawk on that original Duke controller was not nice. The white button and the black button. Like, how do you, like, that was like spinning. The buttons were all just messed up. Eventually, he was like, oh, I'm going to head out. And I was like, all right, man, take care. We played for like 2 hours, 3 hours. And then he was like, oh, before I go, show me that other game. So I was like, okay. Now, this is when I decided that I wanted to game. As much as Metal Gear had such an impact on me, it really did. This was like the sequel to that impact. This is where I was like, I want to play games always. I want to always play games. And it was, I took that controller, I took that copy of Halo, and I put it in the system. and I booted it up. And to almost like the Sega, it was the choir of monks. And I'm there, and like me and my buddy are so blazed. And my buddy's not even a big gamer. And he comes and he sits back down next to me and he goes, "Is this the sickest game ever?" And I just, start up a campaign. Start it up, normal, easy. Boom, go. Cutscene plays. What is happening? What is a halo? What is this ring? What is everything? Why do I feel like I'm jumping into the middle of a story? Which you find out you were, basically. There was books that existed before. But I was like, why do I feel like this universe exists and I don't know a damn thing? But they tell you straight up right at the beginning. They're like, release the super soldier, the master chief. And they break you out of cryo. You were frozen. So, the main character's as clueless as I am. The game starts off very boring. It's like, walk over here, look up, look down, look left, look right. Is that good? Do you want us to do it again, or are you happy the way it is? And it's like, wait, I'm confused. And wait, do I like looking up and down like this, or down and up like this? See, a lot of people are inverted in terms of their control on console, and that's because GoldenEye was naturally inverted controls. So everyone who played a first-person shooter on console grew up playing inverted. I went between console and PC a little bit, so I just put it to normal because I thought up should be up, down should be down. I don't know, I thought it was kind of like a goofy start. It was like being like a little slow. I wasn't sure if it was cool, but it was first person. I didn't know it was a first person game, and like I said before, I liked Counter-Strike, Half-Life, Doom, Quake. I just never had a good computer. Now I'm playing it on a good computer, a console. And, my buddy's like, so when are you going to start killing people? And that's when the door breaks open in Halo 1. And those guys die. And the number one biggest thing, best thing about Halo, and I'll say this, the best thing about Halo, the music. And like as soon as that door opens, like I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it like that. Ba-boom, 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 comes in. And like there's explosions and you're just running through this ship. My buddy next to me takes his jacket off. He's like, yo, let's go into this game tonight. I'm like, let's do it. We didn't even know there was a co-op until I got to the third level. Switching controllers, we found out there was a co-op. We're playing split screen, first person shooter, coming from a guy who's loved, I played Quake, Duke Nukem, Doom, all of them. My computers always ran the game so poorly. Coming from a kid that was born in 1985 and loved video games and always, like, my PC life was gaming and shooting and my console life was completely different, Metal Gear Solid. I finally found that middle ground where it was like a movie, like its own movie, and it was like, it was first-person shooter, and it was running as smooth as like the sickest computer out there. These graphics looked better than computers. This was incredible. This is what I wanted. And then you get to the second level and boom, the whole thing blows open. You're outside. What? Open world? It's like the only other time I ever played open world was like GTA, maybe Metal Gear 2 on the shell, but like this is like we're on a planet, not even a planet. It's a ring. Oh, look up. What? The ring. We're on the ring. I'm tripping balls right now. Like this weed is strong on my little 15-year-old, 16-year-old brain. And I'm so fired up, and they drop a fucking warthog. I'm playing split screen with my buddy. They drop a warthog. I'm in the front seat. He gets in the back seat. Some crazy black NPC gets in the front seat and he's like, woo, punch it, Marine. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Did I just play the sickest game ever? And all I was thinking about was, you know what? I'm getting an Xbox. I'm getting an Xbox. I want an Xbox because I just want to play this game. And I want to play this game over and over and over again. And I want to play it with every single friend I have. I want them to come one by one and sit right next to me and split screen co-op beat this entire game. I love Halo. I love it so much. It was the best game. It was so sick. Mind-blowing to me. Completely mind-blowing. The amount of things that I was learning months after the game came out, charging up the plasma pistol to take down the shields, shooting sticky grenades because they stick. Like, people didn't Google that much back then. You Googled, like, cheat codes. You didn't Google tactics. You didn't Google, there was no like professional gaming scene. So there was no desire to find out the best way to do everything. You just figured it out. There was no rush to it. And Halo was just so incredible to me. I loved every moment, every second. Flying in a Banshee, a Scorpion tank, the game kept giving you gifts as you went along. And I was comfortable being like, I'm getting an Xbox and I'm only going to play Halo. I am happy with Halo. And it's a good thing because for about a year, like you didn't get anything on that system except Halo. And I was like, I'm going to school the next day and I'm going to tell that guy Amir, I'm going to tell that son of a bitch, I'm going to be like, you know what? I played Xbox and I played Halo and it's better than anything I've ever played in my life. And I'm going to get an Xbox. I don't care if you have a million choices for your PlayStation. I'm happy with my Halo. And I went right up to Amir the next day at school and I said that to him. You know what he said to me? He said, I already bought an Xbox with 4 controllers. We beat Halo this weekend. And I was like, damn, boy. Eventually, Amir came to my house. And a lot of my friends back then in high school weren't friends with Amir. And I wasn't friends with Amir at the time. But he liked gaming and Halo. And I was like, why don't you come to my house? Let's play Halo together. And he said, okay, I'll come. I'm bringing my friend Andrew and Sterling. Sterling is actually Stat on YouTube. Sterling is who I created Epic Mealtime with. And I gotta say it, on that day, Amir came over and he brought his friend Sterling. He brought his friend Andrew. And we played Halo all night. And I became good friends with those guys. And if that night didn't happen, and if that didn't occur, if Halo didn't come out and I didn't love it as much as I did, and I didn't invite people over to play as much as I did, and I didn't reach out and make friends with a guy that I wasn't friends with in the 11th grade to come over and play Halo, my life wouldn't be what it is today. I wouldn't have this life. I would be doing something else. Who knows? Maybe if it's in the entertainment space or not, but this level of success, it would have been different. Because of Halo, I made friends with Amir and Sterling, and we started Epic Mealtime. And it's funny to think that started from a game night of playing Halo. And it really did. Like, Halo really was the birth of Epic Mealtime. It's how it came to be because I became friends with those guys after that. And, fast forward 8 years or so, and we're filming the first Epic Meal. It's kind of funny. It's a little sad, but things have cleared up now, and I'm on good terms with Sterling, and he's on good terms with me. But there was a point there where we had a falling out. And Sterling and I played Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3, always with Amir and stuff like that. But, don't tell Amir this, but Sterling and I were much better at the game than he was. And we always played Halo together. And even if it was a big team battle or whatever, we rolled together. Like, I was driving or he was driving, like we tried to stick together. And there's just this one funny moment. It was after Epic Mealtime existed, Sterling and I had a falling out, and it was very ugly. It was a very ugly experience, and it's a frequent experience amongst friends and business together. So be cautious. But we had not spoken for almost 2 years, and I think it was Halo 4 that came out, or Halo Reach. I'm not sure which one came out. But we had played every Halo together. And now this was the first Halo that came out where our friend circle was broken up. And I'll never forget, booting up that game, multiplayer, 8-on-8. And the whole 8 of us was, me, Amir, Andrew, my cousin, Bunty King, Anand, Bunty King, and Sterling. And so it was all our friends. And our friends had a weird divide, of those with Epic Mealtime / against Epic Mealtime, or friends with me, or friends with Sterling, or who was friends first. Amir was probably the only person that was in the middle of it all that was just, completely split friends with everyone. But it was awkward. No one was talking on the microphone at the beginning of the game. It was weird. It was kind of like because someone sent an invite out to all of us, maybe Amir, and I showed up in there, and Sterling showed up in there. And then once everyone saw that he and I were in the same room at the same time, it was weird. It was awkward. And it was quiet. And then the game booted up, and it was 8-on-8. And I ran right to the Warthog. And I hopped in the driver's seat like, let's fucking punch it. And a Spartan hopped on the back on the gunner. And I pulled away towards the enemy base. And that's when I got about like 50 meters away from the teammates and realized that I was driving and Sterling was on the gunner. And we didn't say a word to each other. We hated each other. We actually did. We full on hated each other. And we didn't say a word to each other. And we ripped around that map. And it was the flak cannon turret. So it was overpowered. And we were just ripping people up. And it was like, it was so funny because it was like this game, like made our lives. And then we were apart. And we would never get in a car together. We would never work together. We would never talk to each other. But you spawn and you're both wearing red, and those other boys are wearing blue. You push aside all your differences, and you get in that damn Warthog, and you fly to the other team's base, and you light them up. And that's what we did. And it was just so funny, because I remember, like, everyone was quiet, but once, like, the killing spree was coming up, the running riot was coming up, everyone's talking again, people are laughing, you know, although Sterling and I never directly spoke in that game at each other, we were both talking and talking with our teammates. And if we ended up in the same Warthog, we ended up in the same Warthog. We ended up going on a running riot. It was hilarious. It was like my first time and his first time, our first time speaking to each other or connecting in any way outside of a courtroom was on the back of that Warthog. And so, I mean, if you ask me like what my favorite game is, I put Halo up there. You know, Metal Gear Solid's so important also. Resident Evil, because of Resident Evil 4, I love these games. But Halo was just such a particular time in my life. And it was like that time in your life where you're like the most skilled you could be at a game, and you also have the least amount of responsibilities, but you're the most adult that you'd be, and you have the most free time that you could have. And that just landed for Halo Combat Evolved for me. And like I said, because of that game, I ended up making friends with the guys that we started Epic Mealtime. And then when shit hit the fan years later, and we weren't talking, the only thing that made us communicate was getting on that Warthog together and going up against the blue team. I think that's one of my favorite memories in gaming, the Warthog moment. Also, you know, just the beginning of Halo 1, sitting on my couch, my buddy Matt there. So special. Special experience. This type of heavy gaming experiences that I remember vividly, and I have so many of them. And that's just gaming, you know? Not even the fact that, like, how I feel about Star Wars and stuff like that, and just some heavy gaming memories. I look forward to doing this podcast every week with you guys. I look forward to talking and breaking things down and theorizing things and saying, you know, wouldn't it be cool if, and then going off on that sentence. And although this first one is just me, I expect to have guests for the future episodes. You know, people like Amir, you know, friends of mine that I've gamed with, other YouTubers that you might be familiar with, or game developers, stuff like that. I look forward to having them on this show, the FanBoi podcast with Harley Morenstein. And I plan on bringing you guys awesome stuff. And I know a lot of people say this just because they say it, but I genuinely look forward to hearing back from you guys. My Twitter is @HarleyPlays. If you just tweet at me, I listen to it. I'll know you're talking about this first episode of the podcast. I'll know you were there. And I look forward to having a dialogue with people like you moving forward on all types of stuff. All types of gaming things. And this is a big time for gaming right now. There's a big time for Star Wars. Anime is mainstream. Wrestling and anime are identical, and I would love to break that down for you, and I will. What I'm looking for in this podcast is just the same thing you guys are looking for in this podcast. A solid opinion, a solid perspective from someone that ideally you like listening to. I don't have a sign-off for the podcast yet. This is my first time ever doing a podcast by myself. My friends and I are into the same things, and I look forward to connecting with these stuff weekly with you guys on all of these topics. Thank you for listening to the FanBoi podcast with Harley Morenstein, and I hope to catch you again next week, brother.